Well, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. I especially appreciate you reminding me that I did this audio essay for New York Times Opinion recently, where I talked with Patrick Healy about the salience of masculinity, machismo, toxic masculinity, patriarchy in the way that Donald Trump was not only reelected for his second administration, but how he is governing. We talked about this as we reflect on the first 100 days of Donald Trump's second administration. And I am a scholar of race, class, and gender, and I have written about and thought about race, class, and gender both academically and publicly for many years now. So it is not that I was surprised that gender was a powerful tool for manipulating the discourse and people's political beliefs and marshaling that into political action. It is that I thought after, I don't know, Black Lives Matter, after the obvious ramping up of the white reclamation of American institutions that we saw start to approach a zenith with the January 6th riots, I thought, racism is going to be the card played. I thought we were looking at just, years of, them throwing down overt racism like a joker, right, in a good spades game. And that is not untrue. Absolutely, especially if you've been watching Donald Trump lately. He is emboldened by the success of his first 100 days. He is emboldened by how much he is able to get away with. And so you are seeing a lot of racist rhetoric. But gender, masculinity in particular, this articulation of a new American male that is without a doubt, thought of to be white. But what Donald Trump has done is that he has made the new American male, yes, white, but somehow make that appeal to a slightly more diverse population of male voters. And I thought, well, not only is that fascinating, but it can't possibly continue to work. I just did not expect the masculinity narrative to be as resilient, if not more resilient, than the racist demagoguery. And I was a little surprised by that. So we talked about that surprise, and I talked about why I think this is working so well. And we talk about several reasons, but I'm going to talk about two here very briefly. One is that it's no surprise that the GOP is extremely skilled at rebranding ideas that allow them to center conservative politics in the popular discourse. Easily since Ronald Reagan's administration, this has been one of the most powerful tools in the GOP's toolkit. But historically, what the GOP would do is they would do something that I would call like liberal washing unpopular conservative ideas. Right. So the best example of this, I think, is saying, well, no, we are in favor of equal opportunity for kids in schools. Right. But we are not in favor of affirmative action or quotas, right? So you rebrand structural inequality in public education as quote unquote opportunity, right? They say, no, the focus on outcomes is unfair. Let's just give everybody equal opportunity. Now, anybody who knows anything about what that opportunity looks like knows that that is exactly the inequality that things like diversity and integration and whatnot were designed to remediate. But the rebranding works, right? It allows people to vote on that issue without feeling guilty, without feeling racist. That's the whole point. The other great example of this is the hugely successful rebranding of global warming as the climate crisis or as climate change, right? This very muted sounding idea that, hey, change could be good, change could be bad, right? It's not necessarily, a crisis is not necessarily an inevitable global disaster, right? Things could get better when half the world's population becomes climate migrants, right? They were just trying to rebrand this idea that we needed to do something about climate change as well. It may just be inevitable and we can decide to live with it. So they're very good at that messaging. But usually what they're doing, like I said, is they're liberal washing unpopular conservative beliefs, right? To make them more palatable for the general voting populations that likes to think of itself as centrist or moderate. Donald Trump is different in that he is not rebranding unpopular ideas as more liberal than they are. He is rebranding the unpopular nature of the core conservative belief as the dominant belief, as the good, right, enjoyable belief. He is making people feel good about being bad. That is actually slightly different than what the GOP has done historically. And there's no better example of this than what he has done with masculinity. After a decade of the ideas around toxic masculinity rising to the top of the discourse, right? Aggression, boorishness, lack of empathy, not being good qualities to have, rather than saying, oh, let's call masculinity something else, right? And just keep those qualities, which would have been the old GOP playbook. Donald Trump came along and said, no, I'm just going to rebrand boorishness as good. Boorishness is powerful, right? And his ability to take that, which had already been circulating in the margins of the internet culture, in the sort of underground toxic masculinity culture, and bring that to the center of the discourse. So that is what he's done particularly well. I understood why that worked for the election. I thought that's not resilient or elastic enough for him to govern that way. And Lord, was I wrong. And I give a couple of reasons why I think this continues to work. One of them is how important internet culture is to the dissemination of ideas, particularly for this administration, which is continuing to blackball and push out legitimate media from its coverage and access of the White House, and is instead relying on a direct approach using social media and using influencers and this vast right-wing pipeline of communication platforms, the podcasts, the YouTubes, the newsletters, right? Tapping into that instead of using, say, the White House press corps. So that means that the internet is playing an outsized role in how the president's message is communicated. And here's something that internet researchers can tell you. The algorithm loves a binary. The algorithm loves a binary. And if we had not done anything successful over the last 30 years, is that we had complicated the popular understanding of race being just black and white. The binary of race in this country, for better or worse, has been complicated. We understand, for example, that there are Hispanic people. We understand that there are Jewish people. We understand that there are Native Americans, right? But with gender, there is still a deeply held common sense belief that that is a binary. That binary codes brilliantly with the algorithm. And so every time he juices the argument about gender, he is juicing the algorithm, increasing his amplification, and reaching the people who are inclined to listen to that and believe him. And then he embeds in that all these other messages about power and domination. And it adds up to, so far, a message that has not run out of juice. And I think that's where we are. The short version of this is, I think we are still at the beginning, y'all, and we are nowhere near the end. There's not much slowing down Donald Trump's train. And certainly the anger and the outrage that can be prodded every time he brings up gender, as he did in his address to Congress the other night, shows that he still finds that message powerful. And I got news for you. He's right. So thank you so much for this. I have not been on X/Twitter now in maybe a year. So I missed this, and this is excellent. You prompted me to go look it up, so I'm going to read it for people. John Birch Society is retweeting someone who says, I've been thinking about how important gamer culture is in modern society. I don't mean that in a joking way. It's the primary entertainment medium for youngish men, big cultural impact. It's just invisible to boomers. The John Birch Society, a right-wing conservative think tank, I think it's a formal designation, retweets that, quote tweets it, and says, gamers are the unseen backbone of modern America. It's not even close. Yeah, I think this is a stunning sort of, not admission. Many of us knew it. I will say this. female scholars, feminist scholars in particular, 10 years ago were saying this, and centrist and progressive media outlets, and especially media figures, mocked them. Or even if they kind of like took it seriously because, having them write those essays drew in a lot of readers, they weren't taking this seriously. They weren't taking it seriously because Gamergate was not attacking them. That obviously started to change about 4 or 5 years ago, with some of them starting to, admit and own the idea of how much gaming had made Donald Trump possible. But I just always want to shout out that the feminists got here first, and it is really exhausting to be Cassandra all the time. But also, the full out admission here that the conservative playbook for the remaking of modern society that has been in place since at least Reagan, that was maybe first formalized as like this plan as with Newt Gingrich and the Contract for America in the 90s, finally getting this opportunity to dominate, is due significantly to not just gamer culture, but yes, to gamer culture. I would just say to internet culture more broadly, of which gamer culture is a significant and central figure. This is perfect. Thank you for bringing it to my attention.